welcome to another installment of the Wizard Files, the special interview series where we go behind the scenes with the people who created Wizard Magazine and the comic book professionals who filled its pages. This time around, we have a true titan of the industry with a career that spans decades and has not only published over 267 issues of his own comic, Savage Dragon, and held the title of publisher of Image Comics. We got a chance to chat with Erik Larsen, who I met at New York Comic Con this year. So welcome, Erik, to our show. Thank you for joining us.
Very nice.
I'm a huge fan. Let's just get that out of the way. I collected Savage Dragon like as soon as it came out. That and Spawn were my go-tos for many years, right up into adulthood. So I just will put that on the table, okay?
Okay. All right.
So we're aware.
Basically, we had this interview lined up and we spoke to Mike and I'm like, do you want to be on? He's like, do I want to be on? I've got stuff to talk about. So I was like, all right, fantastic.
Okay.
So it's well documented that you've been writing and drawing your own comics throughout your entire life. How did that love of comics start for you, and where did you get the idea as a child that you could create your own content, create your own characters?
My dad read comics when he was a kid, so we grew up with his comic book collection, and we kind of wrecked them. They were like all from the golden age, and
Oh, wow.
he gave them to us way too early. And my brother would wake up with a Carl Barks Uncle Scrooge wrapped around his face because he was reading it when he went to sleep. And so I guess that probably was in the DNA there somewhere, where I had that kind of going on. And then I really liked drawing for some reason. I have no idea why that was. But I started drawing my own comics kind of before I started really regularly even buying comic books.
Hmm.
I would just get them. I had like two or three comics, like random. Here's an issue of The Incredible Hulk. Here's an issue of Iron Man. And that's what I had. It was like
Wow.
not an, and I had no idea that comics kind of came out sequentially and that there was issue one you start with. So I just did like my first comic, I think was here's Powerhouse number 64 or something like that. And Dragon 58. It was super random. And then later on I figured that out. But at the time, very few comics were starting with issue one.
Oh, yeah.
It just there were just no new comics. So which is why I ended up getting super into Nova when it started. Because it's like, finally, I'm in on the ground level of some new comic book.
That's cool. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like most people, they find their way into either a spinner rack as a kid or like in a comic shop, and it was just whatever that cover might have been at that moment. They captured their attention. They didn't know what number, or even if it was like part 2 or 3 of a series, it was just like, "Ooh, it's Captain America. I want to get
Yeah.
that cover and read it," kind of thing. And
I
that's
had Hulk 156 was a real early one for me. And so that one I think of as being my first ever comic book. I don't know if it actually was, but that's the one that's kind of burrowed into my brain. And then that Hulk was in Jarella's world and he had Bruce Banner's brain. And it was like, it wasn't even like the proper Hulk, really, but that did it for me.
that's cool. That's
I
awesome,
was
though.
all in. But I had other ones. We had like my dad had all these old comics. So we had like old Batman and Superman comics and all the EC comics up
Oh,
until
yeah.
they stopped. He kind of read comics as a kid and was into all the duck stuff and all the funny animal stuff and various superheroes, but mostly Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel Adventures.
Mm.
And then he got into the EC stuff. So as he got older, comics kind of went more and more towards older readers.
Hmm.
And then when they stopped publishing and the Comics Code came in, my dad was just like, all right, I'm out. There's nothing for him at that point, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
So away he went.
So, when it comes to your career, you made a big splash at Marvel, quickly becoming, like a big fan favorite there. Was your intention when you started to get into it and, getting into the art, was your intention to land a gig at one of the big two, like DC or Marvel, or did you always want to publish your own comics?
Both. Because I did when I was a kid, I would write Marvel Comics Group on my comics. So I didn't know that you couldn't do that. I thought that was cool, but apparently not cool. And I just thought, well, this is what comics look like. There's a little corner box that's a circle, and there's a dude standing in it, and it says Marvel Comics Group along the top. That's what they all look like when I saw them.
That's true.
So yeah, I thought I want to do comics. I like to work at Marvel. I don't know if I thought maybe someday my character could be a Marvel character. I don't know if I really thought that much into it, but I knew at some point I wanted to tell stories featuring my guy. So I got there eventually.
It's awesome. Yeah. and then some.
10 years, but I got damn it.
Yeah, now for the purposes of our podcast and where we focus so heavily, your departure from Marvel is very infamous, the formation of Image Comics, and it kind of coincided with the launch of Wizard Magazine, this new price guide magazine that was coming out, which is, like I say, our bread and butter over here. But I am so curious because we just spoke with Gareb. What are your earliest memories of meeting Gareb Shamus? And then what do you recall about creating this cover, being commissioned to draw Wolverine for Wizard number 3?
I have no memory of early Gareb Shamus. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I just I don't know when that came up. I don't remember the process of I don't know why that, of all things, I wasn't affiliated with Wolverine in any way. It was just,
yeah,
it was kind of random. Maybe I know I had done a Marvel Comics Presents story at one point that crossed over Wolverine and Spider-Man. So I'd have to check my cover dates on all that stuff to see if it lined up, because it seems like they should be doing a Spider-Man cover. But then I guess Todd was on Spider-Man at that point.
Yeah, Todd had done the first issue of Wizard, which was a Spider-Man cover. Because when Adam and I first started this, we both asked ourselves, we're like, I don't remember you ever doing a Wolverine of any sort, like especially as a cover. It was kind of like a funny, random coincidence.
It was weird. I mean, like maybe it was the Marvel Comics Presents thing. I did eventually write Wolverine for a little over a year.
Now, just in general, Eric, what was your opinion of Wizard when it started coming around? Because obviously they were featuring Image quite a bit within the magazine and reporting on you guys. Did it matter to you, or were you just like, well, I'm just focused on my comics. Occasionally I talk to them.
Yeah, more that. I mean, I don't know if they may have sent me their magazine.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
I may have been on some comp list or something with those guys. So I think I did. Somehow I got it. I don't know if I was buying it or whatever. I mean, we all kind of paid somewhat of attention to it, but it wasn't guiding my life or anything.
Well, that's
how much is my collection worth? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's $4 more.
Well, it's just like the fans for us, it's like we're learning about Image Comics because of Wizard Magazine in a big way. It's like we're getting all the details, we're waiting for it to come in, and you guys are just like, we got companies to run, we got comics to put out. Yeah,
we got a lot of crap we needed to figure out early on. We don't know what we're doing.
That's true. So
we've never started anything from the beginning before. Let's start in the middle and see how that works out.
It's
All right.
it's funny you say that because like, so many writers and artists now are, either taking to Kickstarter or whatever to create their own comics and own the rights or even making their own imprints. As one of the founding members of Image, was there some like were you guys like terrified? Like, what are we doing? We're gonna leave this like, Marvel and start our own thing. How do we make sure this is a success? Like, what do we got to do to get this thing rolling?
I think we thought at the time that we were kind of the top of the world. So, and that we all were like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. I don't think anybody thought, well, we're never going to get jobs again if this. So I think there was a little bit of, well, let's see if this works. Let's see if these people follow us from this other thing into this new thing.
And they sure did. They sure did.
Yeah, and that seemed to work out all right. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think it paid off and paid dividends, to say the least.
I remember because I was collecting your Spider-Man and then immediately jumped over to Savage Dragon when you went to Image.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, and it worked. It really worked. But was there a moment for you where you felt like, the book, this is it. We've officially hit the point where it's a success, or how big of a deal Image had become? Can you remember?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly the numbers were very strong, and we thought at the time, well, this is going to go on forever, and then it kind of didn't. The numbers didn't stay as strong as they were early on, but it's worth doing. And I think we all had a decent time doing it. So I continued at least. I don't know about those.
Yeah, you did. I love it.
But I also think that like you all sort of changed the industry, by taking that leap of faith and making that sort of risk. It changed the way comics went forward.
It definitely did. And when we set it up, the company in a way, we basically wanted to do a company that we would want to work for if we were making comics and we weren't, owners of that company. Like,
right.
Who would you want to work for? What would you want the deal to be? It's like, all right, let's set up a company where the company itself doesn't own anybody's trademarks, doesn't own any copyrights, doesn't even have a piece of the action in any real way. If one of the guys goes and sells his thing as a movie or cartoon, we don't see a nickel from that. That's entirely their thing. And that seems like, well, that's a company I'd want to work for. That'd be great.
That's cool.
So we did.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of curious to know because, as your company starts to grow, you're bringing in other people. And one of those, kind of titles that you got to handle for a while was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you're in charge.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah. How did that come about? Like, did you pursue that opportunity?
No, I didn't. That was a situation where I made friends with a cartoonist named Michael Dooney early on. He bought when I self-published a comic book when I was 19 called Graphic Fantasy. It featured the dragon in it. And the dragon was a character I created as a little kid. And so I had told his adventures for like 10 years as a little kid. Then I self-published his fanzine. And it was kind of the culmination of everything that I'd done as a little kid. It was like, here's his next big adventure. And it follows up on everything I'd done before that nobody has seen because it was not published. And so I put this thing out, sent it out into the world, sent copies to the pre-Wizard magazines that existed at the time. So Comics Journal, Comics Buyer's Guide, whatever else there was. We just sent them review copies of our horrible, horrible comic book. And several people bought them through the mail, and one of them was Michael Dooney. And Michael Dooney wanted to be a cartoonist himself, and he wanted to do his own characters. And he eventually did self-publish a book called Gizmo, and then he did some issues. He corresponded with Eastman and Laird. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to do my own comic," and he had sent them photocopies of it. "I'd like to trade my comic with your comic," and they're like, "Okay, but we both want a copy." So they sent him 2 copies of the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Whoa.
And then he sent one to me because he was like, "What am I going to do with 2 copies of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1?" So that's how I got my first copy of that. But then me and Michael had sort of started this kind of friendship. And the thought was, someday it would be nice to do something together, just the 2 of us. And then when we started up Image, he was over working at Mirage. I was working at Image, and I was like, "Hey, we can finally do that thing now. Why don't we do a crossover? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Savage Dragon." So we did 2 crossovers, and in Savage Dragon 2 and number 22. And then when Mirage decided they were going to fold up and they didn't want to publish anymore, they were fielding offers from various people, and they contacted me and said, "Well, we've got all these offers from all these different people, but we'd like you to do it." And I was like, "What?" And it was really like out of the blue, like, what are you doing? But apparently they liked what I had done in Dragon with their characters, so they decided I should be the guy to do it, which I thought was a little weird, but okay.
Hey,
And so that's how that came about.
if your money's green, right, I'll work. I'll do it. I'll make it happen.
All right. Well, I mean, it was just kind of a weird thing. I knew Gary Carlson because he was another guy I knew from years ago. We co-created a character called Vanguard together. And then I knew Frank Fosco as a talented artist he had worked with Gary, and he had also done some stuff over at DC and a little bit of stuff here and there. So it was like, let me put these 2 guys together and have them do some turtle stuff. And I liked it.
Very cool. Yeah.
So
when I, came over to you at New York Comic Con, I was just sort of standing there. You were talking to Frank Cho, and he was like, "What are you doing down here? Like, why aren't you with Jim Lee and like the private booth thing and yada yada yada?" And you said the most interesting thing. You kind of turned to me and looked at both of us at the same time. You were sort of like, "I don't want to be in there. I want to be right here with the artists and the people. Like, I want to be right down in it." And I thought that was such an interesting perspective because everyone was sort of like, almost like admiring you for even being in Artist Alley with everybody else. And I just love that like sort of perspective that you had, where it's just like, this is where I want to be. This is, where I want to be
well, that's the room, man.
to like support the fans and support the other creatives. And, it's like almost like a, showing your appreciation. And I sort of love that kind of way about it. And my question sort of is sort of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of go around in the circle. It's like,
Where is this going?
I don't even know. I don't know. Listen.
Well, when you told me the
this
story,
is all going to come together. And so,
yeah, I was working my way there.
wait.
Yeah. But like, the idea really is, what is it like in that environment of being in that Artist Alley at these different conventions and sort of just being, talking to the fans and talking to other creatives? Like, what is that like?
What do you mean?
From your point of view?
You're one.
I know, but I've always wondered if from like, the creator's point of view of like nerds like us coming like, "Oh my God, it's so cool to meet you." I don't know.
Well, the thing is, when you're in that kind of a thing, you can really just talk about either the craft of making comics or just get down into, well, you did this in this issue. Where are you going with this? And where are you going? I like that kind of conversation way more than these brief 2-second things you get in the other room where people are just herded in like cattle, and it's like, hey, it's good to meet you. Let's get my picture. Moving on.
Yeah. No, it's crazy like that now, because like people will pay, $100, $200, $300 for a picture with Chris Evans, and you're with them for less than a second. Take their photo
yeah.
and move them on. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I'm not down with that.
Going back to what we were talking about with the Turtles and Savage Dragon crossover, you've done crossovers in the past with other characters and stuff. Do you have a philosophy when it comes to lending out the characters you've created to other creators, or is it case by case?
Yeah, mostly I want to like the book. I don't want to just be like, hey, use my dude in your terrible, terrible thing. I would rather be like, oh, I like you. I like your book. Let's have my character be in your book. And also, if it's at Image Comics, especially, I kind of feel like, you know what? That's the home team. So if you want to use my guy and you're publishing at Image, the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's cool. Pretty good. I gotta say, like, for me, one of my favorite crossovers was with Mike Allred's Madman, where you guys had the back and forth between the two titles. Like, that was really cool with with his Atomics team and all of that. But I'm also curious in that vein, do you have like, is there a particular collaboration that was like maybe a bigger deal for you? Like, did you get to collaborate with an artist that you're saying you like them, but like somebody you were like, whoa, they want to work with me and we could share characters? Can you think of one that stands out? Because there's been so many crossovers over the years.
I know there has been quite a few.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, they're all fun in different ways. Probably the biggest one, to a degree, was just doing a crossover with DC and having the Dragon meet Superman.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I would just use Marvel and DC characters in my comics all the time because they're not being published. They were just me screwing around.
Yeah.
And at one point, I had done a mock-up of a cover of Dragon meets Superman as though it was going to be a Treasury edition. And I had drawn it and I had colored it, and somehow it ended up at my grandma's place. So she still had it even after my house burned down. So when we did the real crossover and I got to do the real deal, and then Alex Ross painted over my cover, then it was like, I've got this one that when I was a fan in color, and then I've got this painted cover which is all in color. And I got both of them framed, and it's like, oh, look at this, the kid's dream and reality. So
how did you reach out to Alex Ross for that? Because he painted over your pencils,
I don't recall how that connection came. I wish I remember. We must have met each other at some point along the way,
and it's him painting over your pencils on that cover.
Yeah,
right?
it's him.
Yeah.
He had me pencil it on a certain paper and then send it to him, and then he painted over that, and then I wound up with the original. I'm not sure why he was so generous with that, but I do have it. But cool. I don't know. I met him at some point. I've met him a couple times at conventions. So early
we imagine all of you creators just hanging out together all the time. You're all just friends, right?
Just like in a group chat all day long. Yeah.
Well, not so much in the real world, but at comic book conventions, you do meet people and become friends with them super, super quick.
Oh,
because it's like, hey, I know you. I know your work.
It's cool.
Let's hang out. Can I get you a beer? All right. I drink beverages as well. That is awesome. We have that in common.
That's cool.
Okay, well, the thing that you brought up earlier is you talked about your stint writing Wolverine, and during this period specifically that we're covering on the podcast of Wizard Magazine, this 1998-1999 run of the magazine, there's all this talk. Eric Larson is writing Aquaman. Eric Larson is writing Wolverine. He pitched a whole new direction for the Incredible Hulk to Marvel, which was awesome. I love that idea. But like, why did you decide then at that point, 5-6 years after forming Image, to return to the big two and start doing some work with them in the late 90s?
I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I thought, it's been long enough since I've worked with those guys that maybe if I did something for them, people would follow the breadcrumbs back to Savage Dragon. And it's like, oh, maybe this will help this. It didn't work, but it was kind of a fun idea just to mess around in those universes again and enjoy myself doing it.
It's kind of funny though, like, people that, Savage Dragon's not one of the hugest characters, but like people who follow that, like, are all in. Like, look at Mike here, all in. He has issues like what, 1 to 150, like
more than that. That was when I was a kid. Like from when I was a kid, I went to 150, and then I had a bit of a blip where I was living in an apartment. I couldn't collect for a while, but I have way past 150 now. I'm sorry.
All been there.
Girls came around. Let's put it. Girls. But yeah, it just, people just love that character, and I mean, I remember this. I have a couple covers somewhere that, like, him in the police uniform, and just cool covers and good stories, and they're fun and they're interesting. I don't know.
I think it's one of those books that when you've read it for a long time, it kind of rewards you because unlike the Marvel and DC comics that you grew up with, the characters age, so things are constantly changing in the book. Like, just looking at those two covers behind you there, buddy.
Yeah.
Michael. That's the dragon there on the left, and that's his son on the right.
Malcolm.
However many years later, 20 something years later.
Yeah.
And when the book started, Dragon didn't have any children at all. And by the time we got to issue 250, his son had been the lead character for a number of years by that point, and he's got kids of his own.
Yeah, became a hero in his own right. That's kind of cool.
So awesome. So for people who've been reading it for a while, it's like, oh, all this stuff that was set up back here, you're paying off in this big way, and wow, that's cool how this makes sense to this. Whereas at Marvel and DC, with just the creative shuffling that goes on from one creative team to the next, you can read a run on 300 issues of any various book, and it's like, oh, it doesn't really make sense as a narrative. There's not really a cohesive through line in all this stuff, and Peter Parker is just slightly older than he was when the book started,
and then he's younger again. It's
and they just got to keep the same handful of characters, keep those balls in the air, and keep that book going forever.
Yeah. Speaking of that, though, like, what are some of the projects you're working on right now? Anything like That's good. Listen, that's great.
And I'm curious about that because you talk about rewarding your fans who stick with you, who've been reading it all these years, or those who are catching up and want to get the whole story. Now, something we've been talking about on the podcast a lot as you keep popping up in the magazine, we're trying to get the Savage Dragon fans to be more vocal, because there's people like, I love X-Men, and they post about X-Men every day. They're talking about it every day. And I'm like, where are you Savage Dragon fans? Why are you not bombarding us every day with, why aren't you talking to Eric? Well, actually, that's not true. They do tell us, why are you not talking to Eric Larson? But where do you hear the most feedback from your fans, and what type of person do you think is the readership for Savage Dragon? We want to find them. We want to encourage them to go rah rah.
I mean, they're mostly, I don't know how old they are. They're mostly younger than me, although I met a few fans who are way older than me. But they're mostly not teenagers, but I would say probably 20s and up.
Okay.
They're guys in their 40s. They're us.
Yeah. 30s,
Uh,
40s,
yeah.
50s.
But is
Have
it
you-
mostly at conventions that you're running into?
I see them at conventions. I
Yeah.
see there's a lot of groups on Facebook where people are chatting away. I don't know where else. There used to be Wizard when Wizard. Does Wizard still have a site? Does
No.
there's no site.
It's,
There
yeah,
used to be
it's-
message boards all over the place, and
Yeah.
people would constantly be.
Yeah.
You
Have
know,
you thought
Image
about, like-
Comics had a message board, and I think we got rid of that too.
Yeah.
So
It,
those are kind of gone.
it changed with, with Twitter or X, whatever, and all these
Yeah.
other different social media platforms now. But have you thought about like adapting it for live action for like Netflix or that, like for like a
Nobody's ever
episode?
brought that up to me before.
Really?
No.
I think
No, fans always are asking, "Hey, you're going to do this?" But I know better. I know it's a long, arduous process to get something like that made, and you can spend years chasing that dream, and not get a movie made, And at the same time, you're sitting there going, "Well, I'm not able to get my book done because I'm chasing this dream."
I feel
Would
like
would I be super stoked to see a Savage Dragon movie?
you know what it,
Maybe.
but
I mean, if it was cool, maybe I would be into it, but probably.
what's that show on Netflix, the Academy, like of the what's it called?
Umbrella
It's
Academy?
Umbrella Academy. I mean, like if Umbrella Academy can get like a series, I feel like Savage Dragon could get a series. You're talking hundreds of issues. We could
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm sure that what really would have to happen is somebody who wants to do it would have to reach out to me and say, "Look, I want to make this thing. Would you cooperate?" I'll be like, "All right, whatever." But to chase that down is like, I just don't have the energy to be that guy
right.
who's going down to Hollywood and saying, "Hey, check out my cool thing." It's like, I got comics.
Eric, I'm a screenwriter in Canada, so maybe we can make it in Canada.
There we go.
Yeah,
I know. Look, I'm in Toronto, where Savage Dragon, moved to for a little bit.
Yeah, for a few years.
We could do just that section of the story. Just
There you go.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Canada needs a live action superhero. There you go.
Yeah.
Actually,
Sure
I do want to talk about so how did the Savage Dragon cartoon series come about, and how involved were you in that?
I'm a little unclear how that came about. We signed up, some of us at least, with CAA early on, and so those guys were actively trying to get stuff done. And I know that Savage Dragon was pitched as a show to CBS, or was it NBC? One of those. CBS, I think, because it's Judy Price. And somebody else, there was another production company who's pitching Freak Force at the same time, trying to get that made. So you had these two different things, and they were trying to pitch both of them, and we brought in Mark Evanier to write the pilot on that, and I believe the network hated it.
Oh,
like,
no.
we don't like this, and
Oh.
and so they ended up passing on it, and somehow Mark dropped out of being in it anymore. And I don't remember who the hell picked it up and who. I know it ended up on the USA Network, but it went from, when we initially pitched it was going to be Nelvana was going to be the original, and then they didn't end up doing it.
Oh.
I don't know. It was, a lot of the stuff was done up in Canada. I do know that.
Yeah, I've worked with some people that worked on the show, actually, from Nelvana.
Yeah, and so whatever. I was semi-involved with it. I ended up doing passes on, if not designing characters, then helping to redesign some of the characters. And initially they would send you scripts and you'd go through it and make corrections and stuff like that. But eventually what was happening is you'd send back the first script with all your corrections, and then you'd get the second draft of the first script back and the second script. And pretty soon you're just getting like 6 or 8 scripts at once. And you're like, holy crap, I got a life, man. I can't do this. This is too much. So yeah, I kind of dropped out of reading the stuff, and eventually I was just going, good job.
That's funny. So I actually have a question. So, when a creator has an idea for a story and they want to pitch to Image to help in the publication of it and getting artists on it, how does that all come about? Like, how does, someone who's an aspiring artist or has like a really good story bring that to Image and say, hey, I'd love to make this?
Generally, what happens is people pitch books to Image rather than, we don't assemble creative teams for the most part. Occasionally we'll hook people up with colorists or letterers or some of that stuff if they really have no idea where to go and they seem like they're people who we would like to have aboard. But most of it is I am a creator. I know a little bit about making comics. Here's my idea, and they'll send it in, and we'll look at it and go approved, and then it starts from that. But it's generally not this other situation,
Gotcha. That's cool though. I mean,
writers like, I got an idea, and it's like, tough.
Show me your work. What do you got? You got the whole package?
You have an artist? No, I don't. Like, very occasionally there'll be somebody who you go, oh, I know who that guy is. If some hotshot contacted us and said, I don't have a writer to work with, but I'm a great artist, or if I'm, occasionally we'll take some people and put them together, but it's very rare.
So would someone come to you with like, I've got 3 issues written, drawn, ready to rock and roll?
Usually it'll be like, I've got summaries of stuff, and I've got 8 pages just to show you what the hell we're up to.
Cool.
And we just did the coolest part of the story. So, it's a sales pitch is what they're giving us.
Right.
I want to do this. This shows you that we know what the hell we're doing. Give us a shot. All right. And a few guys have pitched blind and have ended up, we don't just poach people from other companies, although that does happen too. But Jonathan Hickman he had never published anything before, as far as I know, and he pitched to us and gave him the green light, as did the Luna brothers. They had never done a comic book before.
Wow.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
I'll just mention, we just had Joe Casey on, and he was talking to us. He's like, I've got a nice deal with Image, and I can kind of come in and pitch most things, and they'll kind of go for it. Like, so is it generally like if you have an established career, like it's kind of easier if you?
It's easier, sure, because it's a known quantity. And he was a guy who we did put him together with somebody on Godland.
Oh, okay.
So that was a situation where we had an artist who was doing his own thing, but kind of struggling to make his story completely coherent. And then Joe Casey had an idea of something he wanted to do. So I was like, why don't you two work together and see what you can come up with? That was what they did. So that worked.
Who was one of you? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, no, please. Michael.
Okay. I'm just curious, like, who are some of your favorite like collaborators that you've worked with on different projects over the years?
Mostly it's been inkers, like, Terry Austin inking my pencils was a real eye-opener. Klaus Janson inked me on couple issues of Thor and on some Defenders. I was like, holy crap, I love his stuff.
That's cool.
Bruce Timm and I worked together a little bit on
Oh wow,
Fantastic Four stuff, so that was fun.
that's pretty cool.
And he's super great guy. So I've spent gone out to dinner with that dude many times at many conventions. So
that's cool.
So you've been doing this for over 30 years now. I have my first comic book being published next year by Hank Canales at Clover Press.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm just wondering, do you have any recommendations for me or advice for me? You know, it'll be my first one out the door.
How far along in the process are you?
5 issues complete and with Clover just ready to hit the shelves at this point. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were just starting out and you had no idea what you were doing, then it would be different advice than if
I could have used this
5 issues out.
You know what? 2 years ago, I could have used this conversation. I've been in film for so many years, but my comic books has always been a true passion of mine. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna do it, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like you said, I didn't realize you had to finish a comic to get it published in a lot of ways. Like there wasn't I didn't know how to get an artist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean sorry. The problem with that is if you choose a collaborator who's no good, then you're like, hey, I got 5 issues done. It's like, holy God, this is terrible. Like, wow,
I only had 1 done when I got Clover, when Hank decided to publish the comic. So then I moved forward at that point. But yeah. I can imagine.
That's good. That's good that worked out. I mean, because you could get some terrible guy to letter it, or when you're completely doing it blind and you've never worked on anything before, you can run into all kinds of problems. But it seems like you kind of got some of that solved. I mean, for people who are just starting out and have never done anything before, my advice would be don't be too ambitious early on. Just, if you've never drawn a page before, why don't you start with drawing a page?
Mm-hmm.
If you never told a story before, why don't you see what you can do in 6 pages?
Mm-hmm.
You can do a 6-page story with a beginning, middle, end, something that makes sense. Maybe the next project after that, you might go to trying to do 20 pages. But people be like, I have this great idea, and it's the Avengers meets the Justice League, and then Alien shows up, and they cross over with Star Wars. It's totally awesome. I've never done anything before. It's a 20-part story, and this is going to be my first gig. Here's my script. And it's like, you have wasted your time. There's hours of your life that you will never get back.
A 20-part story. Oh, my goodness.
And it's like, no, start with something totally small and self-contained and get it done so you can have that sense of I've completed something. Look what I've done. I've accomplished something.
When I was
I had started Savage Dragon going, here's my idea. I have this idea. In issue 267, here's what's going to go on. You'd be like, you're out of your goddamn mind. Who's planning out 267 issues
Oh, God.
before you even start? That would be insane.
Yeah.
But if you're just going day by day over the years, suddenly you're like, oh, look at this. I'm on issue 267. How'd that happen?
Speaking of that, though, when the thing that hooked me, when I was really young, was the mystery of him, his amnesia, right? With the dragon's amnesia. Did you have an idea of when you wanted to reveal that, or was it always
I wasn't going to reveal it at all.
Oh.
That was my thought, was I was just going to let that remain a mystery and have him, it would just be he never figures it out, and the answer never comes to anybody. And I knew I had an idea of what it was, and you don't set up a mystery without knowing who done it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to reveal it. And then what happened was that we decided, hey, let's let's get the band back together and do an Image Comics 10th anniversary special, and everybody will come back and work on their original character. And I'm like, I have never left. I'm still doing. I'm doing it now. What can I possibly do in this book? Just do the next issue and have it just be like come out. That seems like that would be weird to just. And also, I didn't trust those guys. I didn't think that they were going to get it done on time. So I was thinking if I introduce some significant character in this story that I'm doing for you, and it ends up that this book isn't published for 2 or 3 years, then I'm going to be sitting around here waiting to be able to print this, to have those characters integrated into the regular book. So
even 10 years on, you had a concern.
Oh no, these guys are fuck ups, man. You've seen our publications, haven't you?
Yeah.
So when we started this company,
we've read million. We know the stories. Yes, right? We know them well.
Every book is running late, for crying out loud.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh, and Todd's going to draw a story. I'll bet he is.
I do want to ask you, Eric, I know you said you don't have like very distinct memories, early days Wizard, any of that, but you asked like, do they still have a website or are they even still around? Like in your mind, as you look at whatever legacy that they left over 20 years of publishing magazines, like, is there a thought in your mind, like, this is what Wizard was about, in my opinion, and I liked it or I didn't like it? Like, what do you think is the legacy of Wizard magazine?
I have no idea. I haven't really given that much thought. I thought at the time that it was a good promotional tool for comic books in general. I liked that there was that rah, let's go do something awesome. I don't really know why it fell apart. I think it was a mistake for them to go into publishing comic books, because that's
Black
always
Bull,
a weird thing. Like, hey, we're going to promote our own comics and tell everybody what collectibles those are going to be and how one. It's like, no, don't do that. But I guess Fantagraphics did the same thing. They were doing the Comics Journal and they decided, let's publish our own stuff too. That worked out, but Wizard publishing comics didn't work out quite so well.
I also think it's I don't know if they were prepared for the internet when the internet kind of like all of those fan websites, stuff like that, and articles weren't coming out a month later; they were coming out the next day, like of something happening. And
that killed like letters pages in the comics too. For a lot of it, it's like, I can talk to this guy now and get my answer now. Why would I write in a letter so that letter can appear 4 months from now answering the question that is burning a hole in my brain today? Like I can talk to that guy now. Which true. But the good thing about letters pages is they get to be that permanent time capsule that's affixed to that issue forever. Whereas, a message on Facebook is going to rotate out of view and nobody will ever remember it even existed.
Yeah. It's kind of funny though. Like, I'm thinking back to the beginning of our conversation about you talking about like your dad having golden age books and sort of introducing, you into comics, and I feel like that's a lot of the case for most of us, is like, our parent was a comic book reader or somebody introduced us to comics, and it made this sort of residual, like this connection.
All it took is just bumping into something somewhere along, and it can be the dentist's office where they just have a stack of comics or something to keep kids occupied, or a secondhand store or whatever.
My first comic was in an airport. I was in JFK. We're going to Florida to visit my grandparents, and my dad bought me a Batman comic off the shelf at like Hudson News, and I still have it to this day because it was like my first real foray into comic books. It connects with us, and I feel like so much of your stuff, your books like Savage Dragon and just everything has connected with so many of us over the years that, you know, we were just thrilled to have you be interested in even talking to us. And we thank you so much for being on this show and letting us kind of nerd out a little bit and talk about some fun memories and ideas. So, you know, thank you so much for just chatting with me at New York Comic Con and being on the show with us. It's been a true pleasure for us.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Do you have any questions for us, Eric?
Why are you doing this?
What is this all about? Where are you guys? Do you know?
So I'm in New York.
You're in New York.
Adam's in Montana, and Mike's in Toronto.
Okay.
And I met them through Instagram, I think. Yeah, that's it. And they asked me to come on one day because I still have all of my original Wizard magazines from my childhood. So yeah.
Oh.
And Adam and I never met in person. We've just
Steven, I'm blown away by that.
It's but like we talk every single day. We have such a good friendship and connection with one another, and sharing just stories and jokes and stuff like that. And what's funny about it is
finally finds out that you're like 5'3".
Yeah.
What the hell?
I live in a basement somewhere and I'm just hidden in like some sort of like hermit somewhere. But like what we found so funny with doing this podcast is the community of people like globally that have connected with us and Wizard and just talking about comics of the 90s and this era and like Image Comics. And it's fascinating to us to feel like people like, wow, people in the UK and Canada were just like, I read that book. Oh, I love this guy. Or, it's just kind of interesting. And I feel like in a lot of ways, comics are kind of the same way, where it brings people together in a unique sort of sense, that this connection with the storyteller and the storytelling and the art and everything. So, it's kind of simpatico, if you will. It's a unique sort of, situation. Yeah. Again, thank you so much. It's been a true honor and a privilege for us.
Okay.
Bye
guys.
And hey, that was our interview with Erik Larsen. Wow, just glad to have him on here to talk to an Image founder. I mean, I never thought that day would come. So
I never would have imagined we would have an Image founder and someone with such a legacy in comics and Marvel and DC and everything else, and just have this. How many people can you say have written 267 issues of a character, and it's all him? Like that's his brainchild, and it's pretty amazing just what he does, and having him be on this show just talking to us is sort of like a surreal experience to me, if you ask me.
And he's super casual. Like that was so nice.
Yeah, he was super chill, very, very like laid back, and was like, I don't know, sound great, everything's great. Love it.
Hey, as a Savage Dragon fan since I was a kid, I was 10, I guess, when I got my first issue. It's moments like that feel very out of body. Like and guys, hey, don't put yourselves down. I always knew you'd be interviewing these people. I could see. I was a fan before I joined the podcast. So
thanks.
We're glad to have you on board, and we're glad, we can invite you in for this for sure. So
too bad we couldn't have got him 2 years ago to give you some guidance on your comic.
Oh, you have no idea the pain I went through it took me a year to get a publisher. I didn't know how. He could have helped.
All right, but this is just the first of many interviews to come in 2024. Michael met a bunch of people at New York Comic Con. He is going to be bringing them on board. Plus, we have other people in the wings, other connections. We're getting to know so many great people out there, creatives, other Wizard staffers that have been, kind of, hey, I'm ready to talk. Okay, we're going to bring you on now. Finally have an opening in the schedule. But we want you to stay subscribed here to Wizards, the podcast guide to comics on YouTube, but also connect with us on social media. Michael, tell them where to find us.
So on Instagram, it's Wizards_comics. On X, it is Wizards Comics. On Threads, it's at Wizards Comics. On Blue Sky, it's Wizards Comics Blue Sky Social.
Just at Wizards Comics, you'll find
something like that. On Facebook, it's Wizards the Podcast Guide to Comics. And on our website, wizardscomics.com, you can check out all of our back episodes, and we have our TeePublic store. You can get some merch. I saw you had a hoodie. Did you have a hoodie? Like
I had a hoodie on during the interview. I got too hot. I was so excited. I had to take it off.
A hoodie now. I gotta have a hoodie too. Like, come on. So, it's getting cold out there, folks, especially in Montana and New York and Toronto. So
now, if you want the uncut version of this interview, we'll just tell you, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Wizards Comics, where you can get this full, different questions. Maybe, we had to dance around to be like, where does this one fit? Just a little before and after conversation. So it's all there. You can enjoy it. $5 a month. Plus you get scans of each issue. You get uncut versions of every episode that we're releasing, talking about Wizard Magazine. You get to go through it with us. There's private chats. There's so many great things. There's bonus podcasts, 90s Super Cinema, where we talk about comic book movies once a month. And so you actually get to vote on it if you're a patron and decide what you want us to talk about. So much excitement, so many ways to expand your Wizards the Podcast Guide to Comics experience. But we want to thank you so much for joining us and checking out this interview. But hey, until next time, keep your books bagged and boarded.